So hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to create an open and inclusive workplace. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name's Chelsea. I'm head of marketing at Culture Shift. We're the Tech for Good organisation behind the report and support system. And at Culture Shift, we imagine a future world of work that is safe, happy and supportive for everyone. Our products empower organisations to tackle harassment, bullying and unacceptable behaviour of all kinds, allowing leaders to activate positive change in their organisations and maintain the workplace culture that they want. Today, we're going to be discussing creating inclusive workplaces where everyone feels empowered with the freedom to speak up. We all know that inclusion and diversity in business improves happiness, performance, retention, and even profit. And we also know from multiple studies that having a more inclusive workplace where you feel safe to be yourself can have lots of positive effects on your mental health and your satisfaction at work as well. So if progress is better for business and it's better for people, what's causing delay? That's going to be the topic of discussion with our amazing panelists today. We've got around 15 minutes at the end of the webinar for audience questions as well. So if anything pops into your mind during the webinar, then just pop that in the chat function at the bottom and we'll do our best to get to as many of the questions as possible. We're also going to be recording the webinar today and everyone will get a copy of that recording. So feel free to share it afterwards with any colleagues who you think might benefit from watching. So I'm delighted to be joined today by two excellent panelists. Amrit Nijar is the Inclusion and Belonging Manager at Tarmac. She works with companies to work towards building a truly inclusive culture where everyone feels safe and able to be themselves. Previously an award-winning engagement and communications professional with over 15 years of experience in both the public and private sector. Amrit uses this expertise to help embed inclusion and diversity action plans within her company. Hi, Amrit.
Hiya, thank you so much for having me, Chelsea.
Thank you for being here. And we're also joined today by Mark Webb. Mark is a communications and social media consultant, and he's head of comms for the charity and social network for people with multiple sclerosis, Shift.ms. He's also a busy public speaker and a disability campaigner. Mark is passionate about the power of positivity to drive change, and during this event he'll draw on his own experience to inspire our attendees with examples of how organisations can go above and beyond to create inclusive environments. Hi Mark.
Hello, your introduction there, and thank you for that very kind description of my multiple bits and bobs going on. Your intro there said we all know that you know, it's a business benefit and you know, the right thing to do. I'm not sure we all do. You know, you'd hope that everybody who's tuning in right now is interested in heading that way, but I think there are still some people out there who think you know, it's the woke thing to do. It's the new tick box.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't got the data to hand, but every piece of data points to you do it for your business as well.
Yeah, you're spot on. Actually, I think more people need to realise that. Yeah, everybody knows that is definitely an optimistic statement.
Yeah, maybe give it 10 years.
Yeah. So today we're going to be discussing how our audience can help their teams to be happier and more productive by being more inclusive and empowering people to speak up. I know this topic's really important to both of you. So first of all, I'd just like to ask you both, what does inclusivity mean to you and why is it so important in the workplace?
Okay. I think for me, it's just about being fair. It's the right thing to do. It's, you know, it's making people feel like they're included at work. So when they go in, and it's giving everyone a level playing field. I just think it's really as simple as that. It's not giving other people, you know, it's not about positive discrimination, but it's just people using their privilege and helping each other out and trying to make sure everyone feels a part of something. And I think that's all it's about. It's just about being fair and giving people a level playing field. That's what I&D generally is about for me. I think it's just simple as that. I don't know if you agree or disagree, Mark.
Yeah, yes, I do. I think Amrit, you and I assume Chelsea, we spend a lot of time dwelling on this, getting a bit shouty. I don't know if you glue your self to the motorway to protest about inclusive culture or lack of. But I think what we've got to move from this tick box stage that we're at now, with a lot of organizations, everybody seems to understand that you have to have a D&I manager or D&I strategy or whatever. Some people are really engaging with it and seeing the value both in productivity and increased reach to customers and increased potential employees and employees wanting to join the company, but also doing the moral right thing. But it is just that difference between everybody's kind of doing it, like 10 years ago, everybody was kind of trying to do something green, and have now, most companies have got the hang of, green has now turned into a wider thing of sustainability. And most companies really realize they really need to do it. I think we're at that stage now where everybody's talking D&I, and some people are doing it because, oh, bloody hell, we have to. And some people are really doing it. And when they do it properly, it does benefit. And I see, I know I look 21, but I'm actually 53. I think the next generation of employees, the teen, the 20s employees, they are looking for, back to that green argument. I think 10 years ago, you started to look out, if you cared about that, you were starting to look for companies with genuine green credentials. I think your future employee, your employee now who's looking at job descriptions now, is looking out for the companies that are ethically and morally correct. And that, above all that, there's the Anti-Slavery Act and all sorts of supply chain issues that are being resolved and people are signing up to. But it includes, or should include, a really positive and genuinely engaged from the top, and I'm sure we'll make that point going on, engagement in D&I, DEI, an inclusive culture. I need to shut up now, don't I? But I'm just going to make one last point for me, and my example will dwell a little bit on my wonderful experience as a disabled person, but it also needs to take into account every flavor of diversity. I've never figured out the right way for this, but flavor of diversity. I came into all these panels and often found myself, there was always gender on there, and ethnicity, hopefully sexuality. Then beyond that, you were lucky if you got a disabled person on a panel. I always felt lucky. I shouldn't have done. We're the largest minority. Social mobility is important, and sadly, age as well. I'm in that category.
Yeah, I like that flavour of diversity. I can't think of a better way of putting it off the top of my head, so we'll go with that. So like the conversation's kind of going this way anyway, and we touched on it at the beginning. There's definitely some organisations out there that still see inclusivity as a nice to have, and not necessarily an essential part of running a successful business. Amrit, I know in the past, in some of the work that you've done, you've made the link between a sense of people having a sense of belonging and having excellent performance at work. Can you expand on that point a little bit?
Yeah, not just me, but this is something. So belonging is something is quite easy to kind of get your head around. So when you think about belonging, actually to feel like you belong to something, you don't think about that too much. But actually, if you think about when you didn't belong, so that could be, at school, it could be, in a friend circle, it could be in a job, and those feelings, you disconnect, you're definitely not your best self. But when you flip it on its head, and when you do belong, you are your best best self, you feel appreciated, and you're more productive. So that's why we talk about belonging, because belonging is the outcome of inclusion. So when someone, feels like they've been included, feels part of a team, and with IND, that I think there's a really strong connection with engagement as well, and there's a lot of work out on that as well. But belonging is that outcome, and a good way to think about it is diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is dancing to your own song. So you're just really in there. You feel that you're part of it, and when you have that feeling, you are comfortable enough to raise your hand for innovation. If there's a good idea, you're like, well, this is my place, this is my people. I can say, yeah, that I think would work, and that one works so well. Also quality issues, and most importantly, I'm in the construction sector, not saying safety isn't important everywhere, but for safety as well. Actually, in the construction, there's a lot of kind of stop work, and if we want people to be comfortable enough to put their hand up for safety and stop work, they have to be comfortable generally to be able to put their hand up, not just for safety, but for anything. And that's the whole thing about belonging. So we want people to be comfortable, but people will only be comfortable if you create the environment. And there's a lot of elements that you need to get to before people really truly feel like that. But that's the kind of link between belonging and inclusion for me.
That makes sense. You got anything to add to that, Mark?
Well, only that this it being invited to the party and then offer your own song. You've not heard me sing, Amrit.
You can listen to it.
Yes. No, nothing to add there.
Fab. So I think, well, making an assumption here, but by attending a webinar on how to create a more inclusive workplace, I think most of our audience today want to start with that. It would be good to ask you both really what tips you have for people when perhaps if they're not sure where to get started.
I'll start there. Amrit just gave a brilliant speech there. Well, there's a couple of things. There is senior engagement. That's one of the issues. And how many times I'm going to say tick box, I don't know during this hour. But there's the tick box of recruiting your D&I person or introducing your HR policy. But that takes you a certain amount of the way, but I think you need a senior, preferably a board sponsor. And over and above that, you probably need some kind of policy that will have a legacy system, because you might get somebody who is appointed as, wow, a female to a board, or somebody of a different ethnicity or is passionate about sexuality issues and starts pushing the agenda. But when they move on and this policy has been put in place and these measures have gone, they might fade away. So it's senior engagement, senior sponsorship is a huge part of this, as well as recruiting someone, starting a strategy. But it's also consulting the team. I like to be, and when I talk about my experiences as a disabled person, nobody quite knows what to say to me about things because it's confusing. I'm one of gazillions of conditions. I might be having a good day, I might be having a bad day, but you can just blooming ask me and I'll tell you how I would like to be treated. So senior sponsor, legacy senior somethingisms, that's a good word, isn't it? I just invented that. And talking to your blooming team, they know what they want.
Yeah, it's such a good shout. I've attended a couple of sessions recently where that topic has come up of, oh, I don't want to say anything because I'm scared of saying the wrong thing. And it's like, you can't just shy away from conversations by saying that, really. You just have to have it. And if you make a mistake, then everyone's human and you just apologize and move on.
Yes. Sorry, Amit. that's one of the challenges, and of course a sort of perhaps an alpha culture wouldn't invite those kind of conversations, and that can be a challenge. But absolutely, we can all make mistakes. Disability again, sorry, within the disability spectrum, there's millions. There's 80 autoimmune diseases alone. Autoimmune disease where your own immune system attacks itself. How am I, I have an autoimmune disease. How am I supposed to know how to deal with all those people and all those conditions and all the right terminology correctly? But by consulting, by just saying, I'm sorry, I see you've got XYZ, and do you mind if I ask you how I talk to you? Simple questions. And if I stumble in and say something wrong, because I've shown the willingness to be a plonker, it's welcome.
Yeah. Amrit, were you going to add something then?
Just agree with everything Mark's saying. Just on that kind of those questions and not knowing the right thing to say. I think the receiver straight away knows your intent. I think, as people, we can read other people, and if it's coming from a good place or kind of someone just not being very nice. So firstly, always just ask permission. Just say, is it okay if I just ask you some questions about that? I think that's just really important. And then kind of ask further questions and just try and be a little bit straight with people. The amount of times, these microaggressions about where are you really from? Birmingham. No, where are you really from? Just you ask me about my heritage. Oh, I'm Indian. And even if it's actually, I would use it as a teachable moment. So what you're actually trying to say is, what is my heritage? And yeah, it's that. So I will use it as a teachable moment, and you will hopefully give the person who's asking the question the language to ask. But just in response to your question, and completely again agree with Mark, is that senior level buy-in. Before you do anything, you have to get that buy-in, and from your whoever that is, your senior board, and they may have different whys, and it's about you kind of giving the argument. I would love to be in a place where we stop talking about the why, but there's different whys. So is that commercial element? Are your customers asking for it? Because I know the HS2s of the world, Highways England, they are asking it for sure. They want to know what you're doing, how you're progressing, how you're helping, leaving your legacy in the communities around you. And you know what, it is actually brilliant that they're doing that. So I love that. So is it that commercial thing? Is it talent? Again, Mark said, people are asking for this now, all generations. And I think things like the pandemic gave everyone kind of that great pause and kind of time to reflect. People know what they want and what they don't want. So if you want to recruit the greatest talent, that's part of that. And it's socially as well, it's the right thing to do. So help your senior leaderships find that why, and it might be a bit of kind of one-to-one coaching and doing that. And then again, kind of asking, so listen, I know we've got a lot of comms in here, so this is where this is actually how I came into IND and was really introduced to it. We asked our organization, and it was an anonymous survey because again, that trust element and how engage your workforce is and all of that. So we asked our people, if they're comfortable to, how do they identify? And we asked different characteristics, and we had some focus groups about kind of what kind of questions, what do they feel the perceived barriers are? And it is quite interesting though, because you've also got to have a look when you get the results in. If it's like, oh, this inclusion rate is fantastic, well, actually your diversity rate is really low, so all the middle-aged white men feel really included. So you've got to just take things with a pinch of salt. So just really understand your data and what it's saying, and that's really important. And there's other stuff from that. So first and foremost, just listen and ask people what is going on. And then it's about policy work. So yeah, we're really inclusive. We want to attract men and women, everyone. Are your policies up to scratch? Do you just have 6 weeks for maternity leave? Statutory leave. What are your policies saying? What is your adjustments, reasonable adjustments policy? Even when you're inviting people in, are you asking, do they have everything they need? So all of that, and and then it kind of goes down into line manager training, and about making them be aware of their conscious bias and all of that. And one thing that's really helped us is employee networks. So we call them employee communities, and you can join if you identify with the community or you're an ally as well. So we want them to be a community and be as inclusive as possible. And what that has done, there is a lot of work, so a lot of governance, and if people want to reach out, I can give you some more information about that. But they're a great place to go. So, when you do have things coming up, or even policies that you want to work on, you can speak to the chairs, and they're, as part of their kind of job description, they represent that community and they go back to their members and ask questions. One example would be pronouns. So we introduced pronouns into our signatures, email signatures, and we had a list of them. And I just want to check, is this list fully inclusive? Does it have everything on there? And I checked with the chairs, I checked with members, and they came back and they said, this works. There is an option to add pronouns if people want to, and it's not on there, but it gives you a safe place to go and check. And employee networks, yes, there's so much intersectionality, yes, I appreciate that, but it's a starting point for information. With a lot of people are starting at zero, so it is a great place to start. So well, hopefully at some point we'll all be out of a job, us R&D managers, and it'll just be part of the norm, and it'll all be out there. But right now it is needed. So yes, so we have a disability community, we have LGBTQ plus community, we have women's community, REACH community, which is religious, ethnic and cultural heritage community, and a couple of mental health, parents and carers. So I just think they're really good. So listening, and last one would be data. So hopefully if you have data and people have felt comfortable enough to kind of share the characteristics on there, but also other data. Are people leaving? Again, I've referred to maternity. Are they leaving after maternity leave? Are we not supporting people back into the business? Are they leaving at a certain age? Are we not supporting people? What is going on? So look at your data and those exit interviews. Okay, now.
Yeah. That's all really good. I think that we'll probably go into a couple of those points that you made in a bit more detail as well later on. I just want to touch on, so I think you both mentioned in passing recruitment and recruiting specifically D&I roles, but also recruiting more inclusively, which with the introduction of certain bits of tech and stuff, I think is becoming more easy. You can remove bias from recruitment processes and things like that, which is great, and that's one thing. But I think then actually supporting a diverse range of people once they're within the business is another. I know probably both of you actually, but Mark in particular, you've got some experiences of when this has been done really well in certain organizations, so it'd be good to know, I think, what good actually looks like.
Yeah, it's all about me here, isn't it, today? Yes, so I've had a really blessed life in professionally. I went for the jazzy companies and loved my experiences there. So I was at the opening of Disneyland Paris, or Euro Disney as it was called there, for nearly a decade. Met my amazingly, wonderfully talented now wife there. She worked for a different entity of Disney, and kind of started to see a little bit of, she's very senior, and I started to see some glass ceilings smashed through or bashed against there. So, some of the diversity awareness came to me there. We came back to, she'd come out to Paris to meet a handsome Frenchman, and she met me in week 2, poor thing. So we came back to the UK. I worked for David Lloyd Leisure, the premium health and fitness group. And that was a wonderful experience, just because I was living the life, triathlons and workouts before a meeting, swims after a day at work and whatever. It was a wonderful time. But I went for the big brands there, and I was made redundant. Whitbread owned David Lloyd Leisure, and they were preparing to sell David Lloyd Leisure off. So I'm not bitter. And down the road was a place called DSG, which became Dixon's Retail, rebranded to Dixon's Carphone after a merger, just rebranded to Currys. But anyway, Dixon's, let's call it Dixon's Retail, which is roughly when I joined it. And, you know, it sold some sexy stuff, laptops and big tellies, but it also sold washing machines. And it was down the road. It had a great senior corporate comms role, which was what I was getting into at the time. But more importantly, I joined for the people for the first time, rather than the sexy brand. You know, it was a big retailer, but, you know, nothing compared to a theme park where I could go on a roller coaster for lunch. And that turned out to be a wonderful thing to have done, because when I look back, I'd been developing MS symptoms throughout that journey. But I joined Dixon's in 2006. 2007, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I'm going to just focus on 3 touch points that were just brilliant and just could not be improved on. Number one, when I was diagnosed, MS is a chronic illness. Chronic means permanent. It's a progressive illness, so you get more and more disabled. You just don't know how, in which direction, because you can have so many different symptoms and so many different severities. I've got it relatively bad, but not as bad as some. So the first touch point was on diagnosis. MS is a really complex disease. Lots of people don't understand it. I certainly didn't. I went home for a couple of weeks to feel sorry for myself, as you'd expect. By the time I got back, the team around me had taken it upon themselves not only to understand multiple sclerosis, but also to understand the grieving process I might be going through, and the questions they could ask me, how they might want to talk to me, when they might want to leave me alone. Everything, they just did everything politically correct. That's an awful way, but they just did everything right. And that's something that, you know, in everything we've been talking about so far is as if somebody's quite senior in an organization and is planning on doing something in our organization. The word we haven't used just yet is allyship. And what I got there was this wonderful example of people welcoming me back. I hadn't changed from the day before diagnosis until the day after diagnosis, except maybe drinking a bit more from time to time. You know, it was just wonderful to have that bunch of people who would talk to me, who knew how to talk to me, weren't afraid of talking to me.
Yeah.
When you are diagnosed with something like that, and I bet the same would be with cancer, or if you lose a child at work, you know, and you come back into work, some people just don't have the courage to talk to you and fade away from you, and that just helps you feel excluded. So allyship, that's the first touch point. At that time, I could carry on in this senior corporate comms role. I was getting worse, and I went from, over the next couple of years, from walking properly to walking drunk to walking with a walking stick to walking with a rollator, as in a Zimmer frame, and eventually coming in a wheelchair, fatigue, thinking issues and whatever. And I was called into a room by my boss and the group HR director. And this is the second touch point. I was fearing the guilty check, you know, there, Mark, off you go into the sunset, have £4.50 so we can feel good about ourselves. And actually, they did absolutely the opposite. I'm going to paraphrase it, but they said it's all right. But basically, they said, Mark, we love you. We want you to stay. What can we do to create a role that will still work for you, but also work for the organization? So what they weren't doing there was making me, well, neither were they making me redundant, or were they making me, you know, chief photocopy in the corner so that I could carry on being, you know, the disabled bloke in the corner. And social media was on the rise. I was tweeting away with the same journalists that I was more often in London but was getting too ill to go into London to see them. So I was conversing with the same journalist. Our CEO at the time, Seb James, who now runs Boots, he was tweeting quite well and quite effectively. And we created a role, head of group social media. So not the, retweet to win an iPad, but more the Dixons announces and Dixons is proud to share that, blah, blah, blah. Journalists loved it because they had a new channel to report on, because they saw Seb tweeting, me tweeting, the Dixons retail, then Dixons car phone feed tweeting, as well as the normal, the press releases and the interviews and whatever. And it worked for me because I could be tweeting from bed on an iPad on a bad day. And I felt thoroughly engaged. And through that, we turned Seb into the most followed CEO on the FTSE 100. Wow. Always me nagging him to tweet rather than me tweeting for him, because you need the authentic voice. But it was just a wonderful example of a win-win. They looked after me. I felt so proud. I've left 5 years ago and I'm still talking them up. You can hear that. So I'm the ultimate employee advocate because of that. Third touch point quickly. Fast forward a few more years, and I really was, even that was getting too tough for me. I went to them and said, chaps, I need to leave. I can't remember if I was 3 months or 6 months notice, but they gave me significantly more to just go off. No negotiation, but just out of gratitude and loyalty and being great. I wrote a LinkedIn post about Dixons car phone, which ended "Be like Dixons car phone," describing those 3 pieces. It went viral, and it's led to nearly everything I'm doing now, and the fact that I talk up Dixons now. That I've got no shares, no loyalties, but I'm an employee advocate.
Yeah. And do you know what I love about all of the things that they did, as well as like the 3 separate touch points that you mentioned? They aren't anything, except for the very fair goodbye package at the end and everything. But other than that, they're not things that like cost the business money or that take ages to set up or anything like that. It's simple things that made a huge difference to your experience there.
Yes, absolutely. There's this there's this phase that's legally required of, if somebody comes into the organization, is disabled or becomes disabled, called reasonable adjustment. And of course, I'm the cliche with a wheelchair, so it's a ramp and disabled loos, etc. But there's the above and beyond, just the humanity, the human adjustment. That would be a nice word.
Yeah, I like that term, human adjustment. Amrit, did you have anything you wanted to add on just the sort of, what good looks like in an organisation? I don't know if you've got any examples that you want to share.
In terms of recruiting, but Mark, that is, I just love all of that. But it is that the compassion, just treating people like people, rather than, it's someone's in this box, so we've got to do something with it. But just treating people like people is so important. Just you kind of said about recruiting. With recruiting, it's just so important to have a fair process. And I know, things like refer a friend is on the rise, but even with those, we've got to be really careful and just make sure, the blind CVs we're doing. Also, even back the whole process actually. So what do our adverts look like? What are we actually really asking for? And what do we actually really need? And the way, there's a lot of work into it that's been done on looking at job adverts, how they're written, the language we use, trying to be more inclusive. I know, how women look at some job adverts compared to men. Someone at the door, sorry. Those other people home. But so how the job adverts are written, the CV shift, the blind CV shift, all that unconscious bias in there. Once we get people in, those human adjustments, reasonable adjustments, but how are we making the jobs accessible and the whole interview process accessible? And then the panel, do we have a diverse panel, and is it a scoring sheet so everyone can be judged fairly on that? The questions, are they values-based? Competency questions are awful. They are awful. Like, they're just, it just make, trying to get the best out of a person with competency-based. Why don't we base them around our company values? Yes, obviously there is some stuff that we do need to ask job-related, but why don't we just try and get to know the person as well? So all of that, and with the diversity of the panel, you can, again, just trying to push for that fairness. I know some companies, and we do with line managers, but there is unconscious bias training before any hiring manager. So they just have that check, and there's like a little, sometimes people have to do a quick e-learning course just to remind them before they get a job out or go for an interview as well. That unconscious bias training is just so important. As with everything else, I know that it's got a bit of a bad name, but on its own, it's not going to do anything. It has to be with something, and just checking in with people. And once you get people in, if you haven't got inclusive culture, there's just no point, because people will leave. If people can't come in and show their diversity of thought, the managers can manage healthy conflict and a challenge, because you invite diversity of thought, people will challenge you. That's the whole point. They're not going to just be yes people. So the managers have to be ready to be able to manage that conflict in a healthy way and all of that. So stay interviews are really important as well, checking in with people. So yeah, all of that is really important, and just treating people, like Mark said.
Yeah, I think linking it back to Mark's story nicely, if you treat people that well, you probably won't even need to have a whole recruitment process, because you've got people like Mark being advocates, and I'm sure everyone's going to be bashing down the door at Dixon's to try and work there. So
yeah, there was there's this wonderful company beginning with A that's kind of kept us going in lockdown, delivering lots of packages to our door. And there was I'm not going to bitch about them too much, because I've been paid to talk to them in previous public speaking, but the rumor was that they paid some warehouse employees to tweet nice things about how great it was to work in the warehouse, where there've been stories about how long you could go for a wee break and whatever else, and I'm sure they've got issues, and they've done amazing things as a company. They make it very easy for the customer. But on that side, that's not how you do employee advocacy. You do it by what we're talking about now, inclusive culture. I know I'm this sort of Uber evangelist, but just treating people right, and they'll talk right about their company. In a social media world, there's some nonsense rules I see where people aren't allowed to tweet in a vaguely professional capacity. I'm afraid they're going to do it, and if they're tweeting happily, it's a halo effect.
Yeah, definitely agree. So I think it was Amrit before, yes it was, mentioned about data being like one of the important things that companies need to get hold of to really understand the experiences of people within their workplace. I just wanted to share really briefly some data that we have from a survey that Culture Shift did. So obviously the experiences of people within your individual workplace would be really important, but sometimes there's not a large enough pool to go at and things like that. So there is data out there that could guide some of the decisions to get started on this work if you don't have it internally. We did a survey delving into the impact on people of poor workplace cultures, which I think is linked to inclusivity, because if you were being included and feeling safe and happy and supported at work, then you wouldn't be rating your company culture poorly. A couple of the key findings were things like 42% of the 1,000 people that we asked had left a job due to bad workplace culture. 64% said that had impacted their mental health. 36% had felt silenced on issues that mattered to them, and 71% who did experience something problematic felt like they had no one to turn to. So you know, it's a pool of 1,000 employees. It's not representative of everyone's experience in every organization, but some pretty damning statistics there. What are both of your takes on those? Mark, do you want to start?
Oh, apparently me. Okay. No. Am I surprised? No. It's good to have data. You know, I can do all the blah blah, but actually, it's good to have some backup to that. Just a point that does occur to me with data is the world and language does move on. You know, I get the impression that BAME is going a little bit out of fashion because we kind of plonk every ethnicity into, well, you know, solve that, you know, do that and all BAME issues will be solved. Well, no, absolutely not. There's so many intersections. Amrit, you used the word intersectionality before. That's when there's, you know, just different, again, flavors of diversity and flavors of diversity within, for example, ethnicity. And for disability, you know, in the time of Dickens, I was a cripple. 20 years ago, it would have been handicapped. Now it's disabled. So language moves on, and data needs to stay valid. So I'm afraid, Chelsea, you probably need to do a survey again in a couple of years' time. And hopefully the dials move in the right way. But I think data is vital, and data can be used to convince your most unevangelist of CEOs or HR directors. But at the same time, yeah, the news keeps moving on, hopefully progressively. But I think we need to stay up to date with data and language.
Yeah, very good point. Amrit, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like Mark, I'm unsurprised of kind of the stats on there. I will say, you know, people, there's a say-do gap, isn't there? So, you know, where the company's saying we're really inclusive, we're really diverse, but what is actually happening out in the business? And if you're taking this seriously, you'll make it really easy for people to report back if there's an issue. So, you know, there might be some PR work that needs to be done around HR, because sometimes people don't feel confident enough to go to HR. So, you know, one thing I would do is try and highlight, you know, you can take out people's names and anonymize it, but highlight incidences where something has been said and that person has been disciplined or removed from the company because that, you know, that's broken the code of conduct. So, you know, as you get these safety alerts in companies, well, actually, let's get an inclusion alert. Also, yeah, so just we have kind of an anonymous hotline as well. So again, just making it easy for people to report issues back. And what you will see as, you know, people get more and more confident in reporting issues, there might be a bell curve. Yes, it's going to go up, the number of grievances, because people feel confident enough and are trusting the company enough that something will actually be done about it. So you'll see a bell curve. So hopefully it'll go up and then come back down. But, you know, what is happening? So, you know, you want to know what's actually happening. Go and speak to HR. What are people raising grievances about? What are people saying? And, you know, if there's nothing, if there isn't anything, that's a problem in itself when you know the culture isn't quite right because people just aren't confident enough. So I think that is a battle that we have. And, you know, in terms of that language, even for people who are facing discrimination or, you know, the allies as well. So the strongest way you can be an ally is to be an ally when no one of an underrepresented community is about. If someone walks out and says something about a female, the female's not in the room, you as a male should be like, no, that's not okay. It's not okay that you did that. It's not okay that you say that. I don't think we use that term anymore. So that's the best thing an ally can do. And just generally about allies, I think 100% this is what we need people to do. But educate yourself, you know, like Mark's team did. They went and educated. They didn't just rely on Mark to tell them, how can we help you? Because sometimes, you know, people kind of sit there, yes, I'm an ally. Tell me what I can do. No. Go and educate yourself. See what the issues that these communities face and see what you can do to help. Then again, ask permission about, oh, actually, can I talk to you about this? You know, I come into this office every day and I think it's pretty inclusive. But, you know, as a woman, or as someone from underrepresented, for example, again, you've asked permission here, as someone from this community, is there anything that you feel that isn't inclusive, anything more we can be doing? That's what an ally is. Otherwise, it's just performative. Like, yeah, I'm an ally, I can be here to help. But actually, just go out, educate yourself, you know, be proactive about it. So there's just a lot of this stuff that we can do. But yeah, those facts really aren't, yes, surprising. There will be people that leave because of it, just don't trust the process and then leave, and then you've lost that amazing talent as well. So exit interviews are important, but even if you can get those stay interviews and try and capture some bits there, hopefully before they decide to leave, will be amazing.
Yeah, it's too late then, isn't it, at the exit interview, because you've lost someone that was potentially really great in the organisation. Yeah, really good point as well on educating yourself and linking in with what Mark said as well about like language always changing. Sometimes people would say, oh, you know, I'm not sure what the most up-to-date term is or whatever that I'm supposed to use. Just Google it. It's there.
That's the thing.
It's easy to find.
There's Google. Oh, I don't know what I can say anymore. Google.
Yeah.
Like I Google. Yeah, I'm an I&D manager, and I'm not an expert in this. My responsibility is to make people aware of things, and you know, I coach people. But I'm not expert. I use Google. Oh, I ask my peers. Ask people. There will be people around you to help and support. But yeah, Google.
Yeah.
In life.
I'm going to open up to audience questions now as well. So, I mean, we've got a couple more things that we can chat about. But in the meantime, if anyone does have any questions for Amrit and Mark, please just pop them in the chat box at the bottom. You can, put them in there, or you can direct message them to myself as well. And we'll, try and get those answered in the next 10 minutes. One of the things that both of you have talked about is getting leadership team on board, so and making sure that senior buy-in is there from the beginning. Do you have any top tips on how to get that buy-in?
Well, data would be the, you know, it's the, you know, nearly everybody would know it's the right thing to do morally, you would hope. There must be the odd narcissistic ex-CEO who doesn't, but generally, nearly everybody realize that morally, you really should be talking about a diverse culture. But, you know, these CEOs, these CFOs, these senior people are responsible to shareholders, to owners, to, you know, whatever. And they need to understand that actually business performance, the quality of your workforce, is going to be improved as a result of adopting a D&I strategy. So I think that's the difference is, yes, boss, it's the right thing to do, but look at this data, look at what this company did when they adopted this policy. So I think, you know, bring me in to bring on the blather, bring someone cleverer than me with the data and up-to-date surveys that prove that it actually is a win-win, and that's the way to go about it to convince these stick in the muds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Amrit, what about you?
I completely agree. Like, you know, I think also just again back to that why. Everyone's why is not going to be the same. Commercial will be up there, and I think also, you know, especially senior leaders, they like that control. You know, people like to be in control generally. And I think, you know, when you're talking about D&I with a lot of people, they're vulnerable. They don't know everything. But the thing is, no one does. We don't know. It's a journey, like language. And, you know, even if your class is disabled, you don't know all the disabilities. I am in the BAME communities, but I don't know everything about everyone of people, person of color. We're all vulnerable. And I think that's just, it's a nervousness, and it's saying that's okay to say that I don't have all the answers, but I want to be better. I want our company to be better. It's such a big step, and just kind of, I think, especially in comms, I think, and even D&I managers and all of that, that's what we have to do, is support our leaders to be vulnerable and let them know it's okay. We're with them. We're all on this journey together. I think that's a big one. So just helping them find their why and coaching them through it and helping them embrace that kind of vulnerability and giving them, again, the language to say, I'm not sure, I don't know too much about this, but actually I'm going to invite Mark in, who's going to talk more about it and help educate us all. So we've had some, in my company, we've had our HR director bringing people and chatting to them saying, yeah, I don't know much. I'm not from this community. Please educate me more on this subject. And it's been fantastic just to firstly see a senior manager, director talk, be vulnerable like that and just talk openly and honestly. It does so much for the culture and people just get more comfortable. And it's all about that building that trust, isn't it, between kind of the senior management and the people in the organization. So all of that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I love that. Some really good points there. I was going to ask as well about the topic of remote work, which I know there's been much discussion about that over the past 18 months, but I wonder, linking it back to inclusivity, has it helped it? Has it hindered it? What are your experiences?
I really don't want to talk just about disabled people, but I'll make a couple of points, and the first one will be about the disabled community. We've been crying out for flexible / working from home as an option for years. Yeah. And, to the more doubting of people, that labelled us as scroungers because we wouldn't be seen to being productive at home and we get away with going out for fish and chips and whatever. And of course, when the pandemic hit, every company turned on a dime, and within, let's say, 2 weeks, most companies had set up a working from home, not a perfect structure, but suddenly it was all possible. And it turns out that most companies stayed productive and successful, and working from home was an option. Now, I can't argue against everybody working from home because I don't think that's great for mental health. I think there's a big value for face-to-face meetings, and certainly not the hybrid meetings when you've got some people in the room and some people working from home. They're tough to manage. And also the water cooler moments, the canteen moments when you just see somebody, strangers, not strangers, but vague colleagues, but have a random conversation that leads to something. So I'm assuming we generally are going to go back to hybrid working, but certainly for the disabled community, I just hope that we can have that option to work from home, to work flexibly, because productivity has been shown to be maintained. And the other one, referring to mental health, this pandemic is not, to some people's belief, over yet. And I think we're going to have plenty more working from home, however we end up in 2-3 years' time when we are properly through the hardest bit of the pandemic. But that does mean that I think, back to allyship, we need to watch out for people's mental health. I've talked about asking people about their flavor of diversity, but there's also just being a good ally as a human being and as a friend and a colleague, organizing chats. If we have to have the pub quiz on a Friday afternoon, whatever, but just people keeping engaged and feeling part of a team is part of a good culture. Turning on a dime so that the business could keep operating, great, but you also need to look after your team within that current structure and that structure going forward.
Yep, 100% agree. Amrit, what about you? What are your thoughts on remote working and inclusivity?
No, completely agree with everything Mark said. I think it's been, but especially for D&I managers, and this is the kind of stuff we've been fighting for, and it's been the greatest experiment or kind of real push that we needed. And obviously no one wanted the pandemic and everything that's happened, but this working from home is one of the greatest things we've got for it. I can't see anyone going full-time work if they're able to not to go back to full-time working in the office. Everyone's kind of seeing that shift even in their well-being and all of that. And even those senior managers who couldn't be convinced, and that presenteeism, you had to be in the office or you weren't working, and that's all kind of shifted as well. And it's really important people just don't think, yeah, like Mark said, that everything's back to normal, it's all over Thursday, and then, you know, get people back in the office. No. We've got to take the lessons that we've learned. And, you know, I think there is, again, what Mark said in terms of really engaging your teams. So that engagement was, you know, the manager and a few of you are in the office and some people are still working at home. You're not all on the Teams chat anymore. You know, you'll miss stuff in the office. So how do you keep them engaged? What kind of structure do you do? As a manager, do you make sure you're in 2 days? And if people are coming in, can you just make sure you're in on a Tuesday and Thursday because, you know, the manager's in, so you get a bit of face time? Because otherwise the manager might, you know, any decent projects or just the person she sees or he sees will give it to them, and all of that. So how do we keep people engaged? And yeah, hybrid meetings, I've been in a few of those, they don't work. It's just awkward. But I do need to see people personally. So for my well-being, you know, once in a while I will go back into the office, but that pressure's not there. But, you know, I think we do have to, it's so valuable we keep those lessons that we've learned and just don't shift back into anything. And that accessibility just is endless. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? The key challenge, but also an amazing opportunity now, is to develop workplaces that work for everyone. So looking after people's mental well-being, making sure people get face time and everything like that as well. But yeah, equally, why should people with disabilities miss out on opportunities or be thought of as not working as hard because they're based from home? And actually, it's not going to be only those groups of people that are based from home now, because we've all done that and we've all had that opportunity to do it. So,
and also we're in a sandwich kind of generation. You know, there's a lot, people are living longer, and, you know, people who have children, you know, I'm looking after parents as well as my children. So even those caring responsibilities, you're juggling a lot more, I think, this generation. So all of that, this helps. So, you know, from people from, different areas of diversity, flavors of diversity, as Mark puts it. But yeah, there's a lot more that's on your plate than there was before.
Yeah, sure. Definitely is. Okay, we are about 1 minute away from close, and I've got no additional questions from the audience, so I'll probably wrap it up now. But what I'll do is I'll share your LinkedIn profiles or something like that with our audiences afterwards, if you both don't mind, and then if anyone wants to get in touch with you in the future, then they've got a way to do that. Thank you so much for your time. I think it's been a really, really interesting conversation. We could probably talk about this topic all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And thank you to people who've tuned in.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Speak to you both soon.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chelsea.
Bye.